If you are building your file along with me as I work through this course, you can simply keep that same company file open as we work. If you're just joining in, if you didn't follow all of the steps from the previous chapters, or if you simply want to start each chapter with a fresh file, you need to use a company file from the Project Files folder located on your desktop. The project files are actually backup files from my working file. They simply need to be restored in order for you to be able to use them. Go to the File menu, choose Restore, and work through the wizard to choose the backup from the file folder that you're going to be choosing from the desktop. Before we get to tax tables or anything else having to do with employees in Peachtree, we have to go through a wizard first. So let's go up to the Maintain menu, come down to Default Information, and we're going to use the Payroll Setup Wizard. And we'll see that this is actually going to take us through a lot of the things that are important to do, actually critical to do, before we start working with payrolls and related employee. For example, we'll need to choose our payroll options. How are we going to work with this? Are we going to have a service help us, or are we going to do it in-house? We need to make sure all of our company information is entered so all of our forms can be appropriately printed. We also need to make sure that we set up all of the costs that we have, such as benefits like vacation and sick leave. How is that going to be accrued? Are we offering insurance plan? What about retirement? And lastly, we do have to set up taxes, whether it's federal, state, or local. Anything that we're going to collect on behalf of our employees needs to be created. So let's get to it. Let's move to the bottom right and click on Next. The first thing that we have to do is tell Peachtree if we're going to use full service payroll offered by Peachtree or do it ourselves. Now, you don't have to use full service payroll. It's a good idea. It may be in your best interest because they may be able to provide these services cheaper and more efficiently than you can do it in-house. This is not what I was referring to when I was talking about keeping your tax tables up to date. So it is okay to do it in-house. If you need to know more, each of these has a Learn More link on the right-hand side. You can click on that, go to the website, and get all kinds of details about what the features are and what the pricing is. We'll go ahead and keep in-house and click Next. This is the more important part that I've been referring to. When we do it ourselves, we do have to have tax tables, and this is where we get the option to use the tax update service, and we can go ahead and order that online, or we can say we've already ordered it, or we can say we want to do it ourselves. Remember that doing it ourselves means we have to insert all of those tax tables and keep them up to date. If we don't, our deductions are going to be wrong, and that's all kinds of trouble. I am going to go ahead and select this though, and the reason I'm doing that is because we're obviously working with a sample file. I'm not going to connect to an existing Peachtree payroll option, so do it yourself for this particular type of training is all that we have an option for. Let's go ahead and click on Next. They have other kinds of options that you can work with. You can work with direct deposit, which I actually like because then you don't have to print any checks or process them. But again, there are some costs and different things available. So for most of these, you're going to want to do the investigation to find out what's available through your bank and for your company. You also can do e-filing, but notice that's available only as part of Peachtree's Select Payroll. So we'll go ahead and click on Next. Now we get down to the company information. Some of this is going to have already been entered, hopefully, but if not, you go ahead and enter it here. I'm going to go ahead and type in a federal employer ID number. If you have a state employer ID number, you would enter that as well, and most people do. And then, of course, it's pulling the state that it already has for your company information. All of these boxes should be filled out appropriately, and I'm going to go ahead and put in an unemployment rate of 0.025. Please remember that all of the numbers I'm giving you here are sometimes not even realistic. That's why I use them, because I don't want you to confuse what I'm telling you to do here as an example as the numbers you should actually be using. You need to consult with your accountant or your IRS agent in order to find out what the appropriate rates are for your particular agency and location. At the bottom, we find kind of another simple question, but it's kind of a little out of place or maybe unexpected. Do you want to record employee meals and tips? Well, obviously, if those are things that you're keeping track of, then you would say yes. We don't do that with our spa, so we'll keep it at no, and we'll come down and choose Next. The next thing Peachtree needs to know is what type of pay do you have? And of course, there are all kinds of different compensation. You'll see that many of them are already listed, and this will probably cover most of you. You have regular wages and overtime wages. Notice you also could have different types of rates, rates 3 and 4. Those would be for your hourly employees. On the bottom, we see the different types of rates for salaried employees, and that basically is just wages because salaried people don't typically get overtime. This is where you could, however, customize what you have. Our spa is pretty simple and straightforward. We do only have regular overtime and salary, so again, we'll click Next. What about benefits? And this is really a topic of a lot of discussion these days with the economy and small business and big business and what our business is required to do. Well, at the moment, businesses aren't really required to offer anything, but hopefully you do, because that helps to keep your employees happy because they feel like they're being properly compensated more than just what they get in their paycheck. One of those could be vacation, another could be sick. You could offer different insurance plans and retirement plans, as well as something called a flexible spending account. An accountant can help you figure out which one of these you should be using and how it should be set up. What I want to talk about is very simply vacation and sick time. A lot of companies these days aren't separating vacation and sick time anymore. They're giving something called personal time off. It kind of eliminates the problem of somebody calling in sick just because they want to take a personal day or feeling like they're getting cheated because they're never sick and therefore not using their sick time. I'm going to go ahead and choose vacation as my only one, even though I'm going to call this PTO or personal time off. I'm not going to select sick time because that would be a separate calculation. You, of course, would do whatever's appropriate and click on Next. Now we have to get into the nitty-gritty details of any options that we selected on the prior screen. First of all, how many vacation hours are employees given? This amount can be changed later for individuals. Right now, we're just setting up the default. Knowing that there are 8 hours in a day and generally 40 hours in a week, I'm going to say that the employees in my spa, in general, get 2 weeks of vacation a year or personal time off. That would be 80 hours. The next thing to determine then is how do they receive those hours? And if you haven't thought through this, now is the time because you have to figure out how it's calculated. Sometimes people get their entire vacation at the very beginning of the year. Therefore, on the 2nd of January, technically they could take 2 weeks off. Other people accrue it as they work. That way they're kind of not compensated before they've earned it. I like that idea, so I'm going to say that it's accrued over each pay period. Another important decision is what happens with remaining sick leave and vacation leave. Are they able to roll it over, or is they use it or lose it type of scenario? So, does the remaining time carry over to the next year? I'm going to say yes, I am going to allow that. But I also can say there's a maximum number, and this is very typical, especially with sick leave. A person might be able to roll over all of their sick leave for a total of 5 years. That way they can build it up. If they have a catastrophic illness, they will have enough time saved up. And again, it keeps people from saying, I need to call in sick because I'm wasting all of this. So I'm going to say that they can carry it over, but maybe I'm only going to give them 2 years worth. That would be 160 hours. Notice that it says you can leave that blank if there's no maximum to how much carryover they can have. We'll click on Next. Because that's the only benefit we have, it's summarized right here, just vacation, and we can view or edit or delete that. We can also add another benefit, so don't panic if you didn't check all the boxes that you wanted to have. We'll leave it there for now because you've seen how it's done, and I'll click on Next. Now we get into taxes, everybody's dreaded topic. You have a tax liability account number, and you also have a tax expense account. So right now, our tax liability is called Federal Payroll Taxes Payable, and our tax expenses is Payroll Tax Expense. Those are the defaults that come with the general ledger that we set up, so they should be left. If it's going to be something different, if an accountant has told you something different, of course you would want to change that now. If you collect local taxes, you would go ahead and set that up as well. We don't collect them for our state, so I'm going to leave that as no, and click on Next. There we go. See, that wasn't too painful. I think most of those questions should be things that you already know. If you get into this wizard and you don't know the answers, you might want to stop for just a moment and either talk amongst the business owners, figure out what you're going to do, consult with an accountant, consult with the IRS or your local tax agencies, get all of this information in place so you can make smart decisions before you move on with your setup. We've made those choices. We knew what the information was, so we get to click Finish. Now that I've finished the wizard, I can go in and I can access my payroll settings. This is only available after the wizard is complete. So I'm going to go back to Maintain. Back down to default information where we were before, and now I'm going to choose payroll settings. I'm going to go ahead and click through the navigation on the left to show you that we have payroll options, and hopefully this should look a little familiar. Company information, pay types, benefits, including our different selections that we have in our summary, taxes, and then we have field order. This is something that shows the order that payroll fields appear when you print your paychecks. So you can go ahead and select things and move them up and down. Generally, unless you have a reason to do so, you should be able to leave them where they are. This is kind of the default and what people expect. But we didn't have this option when we were running through the wizard. You have to come into your payroll settings in order to do this. Other than that, I'll go ahead and just cancel out. We'll say yes because we haven't made any changes. And now we can take our first little breath because we have Peachtree set up to start tracking employees and payroll.